Have the zombie hordes gotten difficult to handle on your own? Well, you came to the right place, because in this video I'll be teaching you how to incorporate Zombicide Friends and Foes into your Zombicide games. Now you do need Zombicide Green Horde or Black Plague in order to use this expansion. I'll be covering over the components and then move on to setup and how to incorporate the expansion into your Zombicide games. So, if you're looking for a specific rule, check the description below for links to the different timestamps of this video. With that being said, my name is Marcus Howe, and this is Conquering Boredom. Here are all of the new components. We have new equipment cards, including the familiars, which are also equipment. We have new zombie cards for Tainted Abominations and Tainted Walkers, and the Into the Horde card. We also have the familiars miniatures. Next, we have the Tainted Walker miniatures. The last miniature we have is the Tainted Abomination. Finally, it comes with new map tiles, which are also double-sided. In order to incorporate the Tainted Walkers into your game, take the zombie Tainted Walker cards and shuffle them into the main zombie deck. Now, Tainted Walkers deal 2 damage, can only take 1 damage, and give you 1 experience points. Now, Tainted Walkers are both orcs and walkers, however, they do not benefit from ordinary walker extra activations. Also, they have the deadly Tainted Spray. So any survivor who kills an orc Tainted Walker in the same zone suffers a single hit, which deals 2 damage. However, this can be blocked by an armor roll. Finally, the Tainted Walker uses the Horde Rules from Zombicide Green Horde. This means that anytime a zombie card with the Horde symbol is drawn, you'll take one of that miniature. So with Tainted Walkers, you'll take one of those Tainted Walkers and set them to the side of the board. You'll continue to do this, building up a horde on the side of the board. Now this horde will continue to build up until an Enter the Horde is drawn. When the Enter the Horde card is drawn, no further spawning will happen this round. However, the entire horde that has been building up for the previous rounds will enter into the zone where that card was drawn. Now, a Tainted Abomination have these characteristics. They deal 3 points of damage, they can take 3 damage, they give you 5 experience points, and have these special rules. A Tainted Abomination do not benefit from Horde Rules. Wounds afflicted by an abomination cannot be prevented by armor rolls. A damage 3 weapon or dragonfire is required to kill an abomination. And finally, a survivor killing a Tainted Abomination standing in that same zone will take a single hit, afflicting 3 points of damage to the survivor, which cannot be prevented by an armor roll. Finally, we have familiars. Now, if you're playing with familiars, each player can choose a single familiar to start the game with. Take that familiar card and put it in their backpack, and then place the familiar model in the same starting zone as that survivor. Now, a familiar card is an equipment card, so to use them in the game, you'll take all of the familiar cards and shuffle them in with the rest of the equipment cards. Now, a familiar will recognize a survivor as its handler if that survivor has its familiar card in its backpack. Familiar cards can be traded and lost just like normal equipment cards. However, if a familiar card is ever lost, then remove that familiar model from the game board. Now, some quests will use familiars to either put them in the equipment pile or to link them to objectives. So if you're playing a quest which has special rules for familiars, follow those rules. Now, a familiar will be defeated by the first wound it receives. When it is defeated, remove its model from the board and discard the corresponding familiar card in the handler's backpack. Due to the magic bond between the familiar and the handler will receive 1 wound as well, and this wound cannot be prevented by armor rolls. Now, a familiar has these characteristics. a familiar is a survivor. Now, a familiar does not have its own actions. Instead, a handler can give instructions to a familiar. Now, at the cost of one action from the handler, a handler can give one of these following instructions to a familiar. Move. A familiar can move up to 3 zones. Make an attack. The stats will be on the familiar's cards. Make some noise, or search. Now, a familiar can only search if it has the search skill. A familiar can search in the same zone as a survivor or handler, even if the handler has already searched there before. Now, a familiar can hold one equipment card that it finds, which it can freely drop, which means it gets discarded, or it can trade or give to the handler at any time for free. However, a familiar can never be given an equipment card through the trade action. A familiar will possess the listed set of skills, and the handler will receive the bonus handler skills if the handler and the familiar are in the same zones. Now, these handler bonuses are cumulative, so if you have several familiars that provide the same bonus, then they will stack on top of each other. Now, if a familiar provides bird's eye view, then the handler can trace line of sight through hedges or other obstacles which block line of sight. However, they still cannot trace line of sight into buildings past walls or closed doors. A survivor can use this line of sight in order to make an attack. Also, a familiar can move freely with its handler as long as the familiar and the handler are in the same zone. This means that the familiar gets all of the same bonuses and benefits of move actions that the handler has. Finally, a familiar does not have an inventory. Those are all of the rules for familiars. Finally, the back of the book gives you 10 new quests which you can go ahead and try, which will add the new familiars and equipment cards for them into the quest objectives. Now, this expansion adds both hedges and water zones, which were originally seen in Zombicide Green Horde. Now, hedges block line of sight, so these two cannot see each other. However, if you're playing with the Wolfensburg expansion, survivors in a tower zone are unaffected by this. Now, anytime a survivor crosses a hedge which they do not have line of sight to, then they have to roll a die. On anything other than a 1, they are fine. However, on a roll of a 1, they run into an Orc Walker that they weren't expecting. Now, the expansion also introduces water zones, and these are zones where the survivor is at least waist deep in water. Now, there are 2 aspects of it. There's either banks, which are the light, shallow areas which are easy to cross over, or ledges, which are dictated by this dark shadow. Waterhole zones affect movement. To move from one waterhole zone to another waterhole zone requires 1 additional movement. To move through a bank, which are these light, shallow areas, there is no penalty. However, to move from one waterhole zone through a ledge requires 1 additional action as well. Now, on the other hand, a zombie moving from one waterhole zone to another waterhole zone, there is no penalty. There is also no penalty for a zombie moving through a bank. Now, a zombie is unable to move through a ledge, so the zombie will have to find another route around. Other features on the common border still apply, so walls will prevent movement in line of sight, and hedges will also prevent line of sight. Survivors benefiting from speed enchantment ignore the waterhole zone effects. Siege engines, which move into the waterhole zone, are destroyed immediately. Dragonfire from any origin will have no effect in any waterhole zones. Now, any actor moving into a waterhole zone, either through a bank or through a ledge, follow the normal movement rules. That is everything you need to know in order to incorporate Zombicide Friends and Foes into your Zombicide games. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell, because we'll be releasing a lot more videos like this one, as well as our playthroughs and punishment rounds. Also, if there's a particular game you would like us to teach, let us know down in the comments section below. Now you can find some of our other videos or Zombicide tutorials right over there. But in the meantime, until next time, keep conquering.